Please gather your things, the flight attendant said coldly, not bothering to verify the ticket clutched in Janelle's hand. Dozens of first-class passengers sat frozen, watching as the 17-year-old black girl was quietly forced from seat 2A, without a word of protest, without a single voice raised in her defense. But when Janelle sent one short message from the back of the plane, the entire flight was brought to a halt, and the sky was about to answer for its silence. A soft morning haze hung over Charlotte Douglas International Airport as travelers bustled through Terminal B, some dragging carry-ons, others glued to their phones. Among the crowd, a poised 17-year-old girl named Janelle Price moved quietly and with purpose. Dressed in a simple navy sweatshirt, jeans, and worn sneakers, she blended easily into the sea of passengers, yet carried herself with a quiet grace that made her stand out to those who noticed. Slung over her shoulder was an old brown leather backpack, faded from years of daily use. It was the same one she had taken to robotics camp, debate nationals, and now, her first solo cross-country flight. She reached gate 41 early, her boarding pass carefully folded inside a transparent sleeve tucked into her hoodie pocket. Flight 948 would take her from Charlotte to San Diego, where she would tour a research facility as part of a prestigious national STEM scholarship program. Her godmother, Dr. Lizette Monroe, had bought her the first-class ticket, seat 2A, not just as a reward but as a reminder, you deserve to be here. The boarding process was smooth. The first-class section was only half full, dotted with professionals in pressed suits, a retired couple reading matching hardcovers, and a tech exec whose Bluetooth earpiece never left his jawline. Janelle stepped into the cabin quietly, nodding politely at the flight attendant stationed at the front. She made her way to seat 2A, next to the window, and sat down with a soft exhale, setting her backpack gently at her feet. She didn't pull out her phone or plug in her earbuds. Instead, she opened a dog-eared copy of The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks and let herself get lost in the pages. Occasionally, she'd glance out the window at the golden streaks of sunlight reflecting off the tarmac. This wasn't just a flight, it was a marker of everything she'd earned through grit, sleepless nights, and unwavering belief in herself. But that quiet pride began to crumble the moment she heard the sharp click of heels approaching. Dana Coleman had worked for Unity Air for over 17 years. Her uniform was crisp, her makeup precise, her posture sharpened by years of performing authority. She smiled at the well-dressed businessman in 1C as she passed him, but when her eyes fell on Janelle, young, black, and dressed nothing like the rest of the cabin, her expression subtly changed. Not a frown. Not a scowl. Just a shift. A mental checkbox suddenly questioned what it had just seen. She stopped abruptly at seat 2A, towering slightly over Janelle. "Excuse me, miss," she said, her tone clipped and loud enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" Janelle looked up, startled but not rattled. "Yes, ma'am." "Seat 2A," she replied softly, reaching for the boarding pass in her hoodie pocket. Dana didn't wait to see it. She didn't lean in to verify the name or the seat number. She glanced, scoffed faintly, and folded her arms. "This is a first-class seat." The words weren't a question. They were an accusation. "I know," Janelle answered, trying to maintain composure. "It was purchased by my guardian, Dr. Lizette Monroe." That name meant nothing to Dana. Or maybe it did, but not in this moment. All she saw was a girl who didn't look like she belonged. Dana's voice sharpened. "You need to come with me. You must have been upgraded by mistake or picked up the wrong boarding group. Come on." A few heads turned. One man lowered his newspaper. A woman 2 rows back shifted uncomfortably in her seat. But no one said a word. Janelle hesitated. "I have my ticket right here." She held it out, the plastic sleeve catching the light. Dana didn't take it. She didn't lean forward. She simply waved it off. "Please gather your things. You're delaying our boarding." The words stung more than they should have. Not because of the volume, not because of the command, but because of the way they were delivered. With certainty. As if it was already decided that someone like Janelle Price didn't belong in a seat like 2A. Janelle slowly zipped her backpack and stood, her heart beating like a metronome in her ears. The walk down the aisle felt longer than the flight itself. She didn't make eye contact. No one offered help. No one said, "Wait, maybe we should check." She was led past row after row of silent travelers. Some glanced up. Others looked away. In economy, Dana pointed toward an empty window seat near the rear and muttered, "Sit here." Then she turned and disappeared without another word. Janelle lowered herself into the seat, gently placing her backpack beneath the chair. She stared out the window, her breath shallow, her fingers lightly trembling. She unlocked her phone. Opened messages. Tapped Lizette's name. Then typed. "They made me leave my seat. Said I didn't belong there." She hesitated, reread it, and hit send. Outside, the morning sun kept rising, oblivious to what had just happened inside the plane. To most of the passengers, this was just another day. But to Janelle, this was something else entirely. A betrayal. A quiet erasure. And yet, beneath her sweatshirt, behind the stillness of her posture, something inside her remained unbroken. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She didn't shout. She just waited. Because Janelle Price, age 17, knew something Dana Coleman didn't. She wasn't just some girl with a boarding pass. She was the goddaughter of one of the most powerful women in American aviation. And in less than 15 minutes, Flight 948, the plane that thought it could simply erase her, was about to be grounded. Not by turbulence, but by the truth. The message had barely left Janelle's phone before it reached a secure FAA server in Washington, D.C., routed instantly to an encrypted inbox belonging to Dr. Lizette Monroe. 3 time zones away, Lizette sat at the head of a polished walnut conference table, mid-sentence in a quarterly FAA oversight review when her smartwatch buzzed once, silent but unmistakable. She glanced down. Her eyes narrowed. She tapped the message. "They made me leave my seat. Said I didn't belong there." No context. No emojis. Just truth, raw and contained in a single line from a girl who didn't know yet that her quiet resistance was about to bring a $400 million aircraft to a full and immediate stop. Lizette's heart slowed. Then accelerated. She didn't ask herself whether the message was exaggerated. She didn't question whether there had been a misunderstanding. She knew her goddaughter. She knew the way Janelle wrote when she was hurt, when she was holding back anger just to stay composed. And she also knew the system, the way subtle racism camouflaged itself as policy enforcement. Her voice lowered to the colleagues at her table. "Excuse me. I need 5 minutes." She stepped into a soundproof glass-paneled call booth, locked the door, and connected directly to FAA Flight Operations Command. "Director Monroe," the voice answered almost immediately. "How can I assist?" Lizette didn't waste a breath. "I need an emergency hold on Unity Air Flight 948, Charlotte to San Diego. It hasn't left the gate yet. Secure the aircraft. Don't let them taxi." A pause. "Ma'am, reason for the hold?" "Potential civil rights violation involving a minor passenger in first class. My goddaughter." That was all. No further explanation needed. The response came within seconds. "Yes, Director. Grounding procedure initiated now." On the tarmac in Charlotte, the engines of Flight 948 had just begun to spin up when the cockpit's onboard display blinked red. "FAA ground hold, do not taxi. Captain Ronald Merritt, A. Veteran pilot with over 25 years in the sky, frowned and double-checked the notification. "That's not weather," he muttered, flipping the comm switch. "Control, this is Flight 948. We've received a ground hold directive. Can you confirm?" The voice came back clear but tight. "Affirmative, 948. FAA has flagged your flight. Maintain current gate position. Do not push back. Further instructions pending." Merritt exchanged a glance with his first officer. "Well, that's new. In the front galley, Dana Coleman sipped from a small plastic cup, unaware of the chain reaction she had just triggered. She straightened her blazer, smoothing the edge with practiced fingers, thinking she had handled the situation professionally. A young girl in the wrong seat, misunderstanding, politely redirected. Done. But then the intercom buzzed. "Miss Coleman, please report to the cockpit immediately." A chill crept up her spine. Flight attendants were rarely called to the cockpit unless turbulence was involved, or trouble. She walked briskly through first class, nodding politely to passengers, her posture upright. Inside the cockpit, Captain Merritt gestured toward the headset. "You've got a direct line to FAA Ops. They want to speak with you personally." Dana raised an eyebrow. "Me?" "You," he confirmed, expression unreadable. She placed the headset over her ears, lips still curled in the corners with that well-worn customer service expression. But the voice on the other end wiped the smile clean. "This is Deputy Administrator Sanders, FAA Command," the voice began. "Miss Coleman, we're investigating a complaint filed moments ago involving the removal of a minor from her assigned first-class seat. Did you ask a passenger to relocate from seat 2A? Dana blinked, caught off guard by the directness. "Yes, I believe the passenger was in the wrong section." She appeared confused. "I didn't have a manifest in hand, but I acted on instinct to preserve the boarding process." "Did you verify her? Boarding pass with the crew list or ask ground staff for assistance?" "No, sir." She presented a pass, but you glanced at it, assumed it was invalid, and proceeded to remove a minor passenger from her paid seat without protocol or confirmation. "Is that correct?" Dana's silence stretched dangerously. "I did what I thought was necessary." "That passenger is Janelle Price. 17. Legal guardian is Director Lizette Monroe, my superior." The voice turned colder. "And now you've involved the FAA at the highest level over a failure to follow basic procedure." Dana opened her mouth to defend herself, but the line cut her off. "You will return to the passenger immediately. You will apologize publicly. You will return her to seat 2A. This is no longer optional. The cabin watched you humiliate a child who belonged in that seat. Now they'll watch you correct it." The call ended with a click. The silence in the cockpit was thick. Captain Merritt didn't say a word. He simply nodded toward the door. Dana exited, her throat tight, heart pounding, legs suddenly heavier than they had ever felt on a jet bridge. She walked past first class and into economy. Rows blurred. Passengers barely looked up. But Janelle was sitting at the window seat, head turned outward, watching the runway stretch into morning light. Dana approached and cleared her throat. "Miss Price," she said, her voice softer than it had been all day. "There's been a misunderstanding. We, need you to return to your original seat. Seat 2A. Janelle turned slowly. Her face was calm, unreadable. Her voice clear. "Why was I the only one asked to prove I belonged?" The words landed like thunder in the silence of economy. A woman in the next row froze. A man glanced up, eyes widening. Dana didn't answer. She couldn't. The words had stripped away every illusion of control. After a few seconds of thick silence, Janelle stood. She didn't say another word. She picked up her backpack, slung it over one shoulder, and walked past Dana, back down the aisle, past the leather seats and expensive handbags, back to the place she never should have been forced to leave. She sat in 2A, straightened her back, and folded her hands in her lap. The hum of whispers followed. They came from all corners of the cabin, quiet, unsure, but undeniable. The murmurs of those who had once looked away but now saw the truth for what it was. In the cockpit, Captain Merritt radioed ground control. "Flight 948 is grounded until FAA officers arrive on board. Compliance breach reported. Standing by." In Washington, Lizette Monroe received the confirmation. Her goddaughter was back in her seat. The aircraft was no longer moving. But the system was. A ripple had become a wave. And that wave would not stop. Not this time. Not ever again. The aircraft remained still at the gate, but the air inside Flight 948 was no longer calm. The hum of engines had softened, but the tension had thickened, pressing down on every row like a storm cloud waiting to break. The seatbelt sign stayed lit though no one moved. No flight attendant gave updates. No passenger asked questions. They all waited, some unsure of what exactly had happened, others already piecing it together from the ripple of whispers that had spread ever since Janelle Price calmly walked back down the aisle and reclaimed seat 2A. She hadn't demanded it. She hadn't raised her voice. She simply walked with the quiet certainty of someone who knew she had never been in the wrong. She now sat upright, hands resting on her knees, backpack beneath her feet, her gaze fixed ahead as though bracing for the next chapter of something she didn't ask for, but would not run from either. In the galley, Dana Coleman stood stiff against the metal counter, her uniform immaculate, her scarf perfectly knotted, but her insides unraveling with every passing second. The headset call still echoed in her head, particularly the last line, "You've involved the FAA at the highest level over a failure to follow basic procedure." Her pride was a shell now. And it was cracking. She heard the footsteps before she saw them. From the aircraft door came the unmistakable sound of authority, measured, unhurried, unmistakable. Two individuals boarded, one in a Navy FAA uniform with the badge gleaming against her chest, the other in a gray suit carrying a slim black folder. Their presence didn't require an introduction. The cabin knew. The murmurs faded into silence. The hum of the air system became the only sound. The FAA had arrived. They moved with purpose, not speaking until they reached the cockpit, where Captain Merritt stood waiting. He gave a respectful nod, stepped aside, and allowed them access to the flight logs and crew manifest. After a few low-voiced exchanges, the uniformed woman turned toward the galley, her eyes scanning first class. "We need to speak with Flight Attendant Dana Coleman," she said, her voice calm but undeniable. Dana flinched slightly, then straightened and stepped forward. "That's me," she replied, her voice quieter than usual. "Please come with us," the agent said, not unkindly, but without leaving room for negotiation. Dana hesitated only for a moment. Then she walked, heels clicking softly, passing the rows of first-class passengers who had watched everything unfold just moments ago. No one spoke to her. No one made eye contact. She reached the aircraft door. The man in the suit stepped beside her, said nothing, and walked with her down the jet bridge. There were no handcuffs. No shouting. But no doubt remained, this wasn't just a conversation. It was accountability. Back in the cabin, passengers slowly exhaled the breaths they didn't realize they were holding. A businessman in row 1B turned to the woman beside him and whispered, "That was the flight attendant, wasn't it?" The woman nodded. "Yeah. They're not letting this go." Janelle heard it all, but didn't move. She didn't look around. She remained still, because stillness was her power. She wasn't waiting for applause or apologies. She was waiting for the system to finish the work her message had started. 30 minutes later, an announcement came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your patience. Due to an administrative compliance matter, Flight 948 will continue boarding procedures shortly. Thank you for remaining seated." It was vague. Corporate. But no one misunderstood what it meant. The plane was cleared to continue, but the consequences of what had occurred would travel far beyond this flight. From Washington to airline headquarters, the wave had already reached decision-makers. At Unity Air's corporate office, a crisis team had convened. Footage from the cabin, including audio from the flight recorder, had been requested. A public relations specialist warned of early social media posts beginning to trend. But it was the FAA memo, stamped urgent, that landed like a hammer in the conference room. Subject: Flight 948 passenger displacement violation, immediate action required. The bullet points underneath were damning. Minor removed from assigned seat without ticket verification. No coordination with ground crew. Failure to follow FAA-mandated protocol. The memo ended with a directive: FAA recommends immediate termination of involved crew member and system-wide procedural audit. Passenger protection clause pending review. CEO Arthur Long sat back in his chair, rubbing his temple. "We can't PR spin this," he muttered. "Then we don't," the compliance officer said quietly. "We admit fault. We change." And they did. In less than 48 hours, Unity Air issued a national apology. The press release named the passenger, Miss Janelle Price, and confirmed the incident had led to a zero-tolerance discrimination review. Within a week, a new internal rule was passed and adopted by the FAA, the Janelle Price provision. It mandated that no minor passenger could be removed from a paid seat without dual verification, one digital, one manual, and no action could be taken based on appearance or assumption alone. The aviation world took notice. So did educators. Janelle's story became required material in several airline diversity and bias training programs. Flight academies showed security footage in ethics classes. High schools in Atlanta used it in civics discussions. One school printed her name beneath the words, "Courage doesn't always shout. Sometimes it sits quietly in 2A." Through it all, Janelle remained out of the spotlight. She turned down interviews. Declined magazine features. She didn't want to be a symbol. She wanted to graduate, go to college, build robots, study stars. But she understood now that even sitting still in the right place could make history. Weeks later, in her modest home in East Atlanta, she sat curled on the couch, a blanket across her lap, a mug of hot tea in her hands. Across the room, Lizette Monroe was typing at the dining table, working late as usual. Janelle stared out the window. It had rained earlier. Drops clung to the glass like soft punctuation marks to the quiet. Lizette looked up. "You okay?" she asked gently. Janelle nodded, but didn't speak. After a moment, Lizette said, "If you could go back, would you have done anything differently?" Janelle's answer came without hesitation. Her voice was calm, but certain. "No," she said. "I'd still sit in seat 2A." Lizette smiled softly, not prideful, not relieved, just full of something deeper. Respect. The house was quiet again. But in that silence lived the echo of a moment that had shaken the sky, not with volume, not with outrage, but with the steady, unyielding presence of a girl who refused to shrink. Janelle didn't need to make noise. She only needed to be seen. And now, the whole country had seen her. What happened to Janelle Price on Flight 948 wasn't just a moment of personal injustice, it was a mirror held up to all of us. It was a reminder that prejudice often doesn't arrive wearing a uniform of hate. Sometimes, it shows up quietly, tucked behind protocol, gut instinct, or professional intuition. And too often, the world lets it pass without question until someone chooses not to move. Janelle didn't raise her voice. She didn't scream or demand special treatment. She simply refused to disappear. Her decision to stay composed, to speak only when necessary, and to place her trust in someone who believed in her, that's what changed everything. It wasn't the noise of protest that shook the system. It was the undeniable truth of her presence and the power of having someone in her corner who knew how to act. Here's the truth: injustice thrives when good people remain silent. Every person on that flight had a chance to say, "Wait. Are you sure? Let's double-check." But no one did. And that silence, more than Dana Coleman's assumption, is what should make us all stop and reflect. Because when we stay silent in the face of something wrong, we become part of the problem. To every reader or listener who hears Janelle's story, let this be your reminder: your voice matters. Whether you're the one being overlooked, or the person sitting nearby who notices it, how you choose to respond will either protect dignity or prolong damage. Don't wait for someone else to speak up. Don't wait for authority to intervene. Respect begins with recognition, and it can start with you. And to young people, especially those who've ever been told they don't belong, remember this: your seat is earned, your presence is valid, and your silence doesn't make you weak. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is sit tall in a space that was never designed to welcome you, and let your existence be your revolution. From all of us at US Daily Story, thank you for listening. Thank you for standing with stories like Janelle's. If this moved your heart, we invite you to like, share, and subscribe, not just for content, but to be part of a community that believes in truth, justice, and the quiet power of dignity. Stay aware. Stay compassionate. And never underestimate what a single act of courage can change.